Welcome to Briefly Everything, your own YouTube course for all of human history. You can start here or anywhere along the timeline, preferably in the beginning of it all, if you want it all to make a little bit more sense. The last time we looked back in time, we were hunter-gatherers, moving around to find food. This all came to a big halt when we started growing crops and domesticating animals around 10,000 BCE. And that's where we'll start today, with what we call the Agricultural Revolution. Before we move on, we're not in the millions anymore, and like I just said, 10,000 BCE, and I just want to clarify this. CE means Common Era, so the year 0, or actually year 1, and BCE then means before the Common Era, and that's what you'll hear for the next 10,000 years. Since agriculture meant we could get more food from the same amount of land, people settled down and completely changed their lifestyles. So in today's episode, I won't jump through dates a la Briefly Everything. Instead, we'll just give you the vague dates 10,000 to 4,000 BCE, during which time small groups of farmers converted from nomadism to agriculturalism, but nothing noteworthy enough to be called civilization just yet. We'll get to that in upcoming videos, so let's get cropping. Here's the difference in food production efficiency. Hunter-gatherers, which we've been most through history, 1 kilometer a day can generate, on average mind you, food for 0.1 person. Traditional agriculture, and traditional now being in the sense of not using modern cropping tools, could on the other hand sustain 100 humans on the same 1 square kilometer. So growing food is 1,000 times more efficient than running around looking for it. Try running around in the woods one day for food and you'll see how tough that is. So with the advent of farming, from the start of this video to year 1, the world population increased 25-fold. And along with our technological advancements, we're now at 7 billion, which is another 28-fold increase. Funny enough, people changing their lifestyles didn't seem to be a coincidence, as we found evidence of people turning to agriculture all over the world at around this same time. As if all of humanity had latched on to the concept of farming at the same time. Fascinating really when you think about it. The agricultural revolution fundamentally changed our life, and it obviously didn't come overnight, but changed slowly over time. Here I'll point out some of the hotspots for farming life 10,000 years ago. We'll start from right to left, and we'll start with China up in the north here, and then the Indus Valley, nowadays India and a few other countries, Mesopotamia around here, over to Egypt, and also all the way to Central America. Note that early civilizations always popped up close to rivers in order to secure the crops. In terms of time periods, 10,000 BC is also when we move from the Paleolithic and now moving into the Neolithic Age, aka the New Stone Age. Note that the whole world changes slowly over time, moving into this Neolithic Age, so it's hard to put an exact date on much of this, but you could say that the Neolithic Age refers to when people started using more advanced tools to settle down and ushered in agriculture. So since farming was so efficient, it led to a surplus of resources, and not everyone had to work on getting dinner ready, which opened up for specialization in trade. So some people became tradesmen, some could design buildings, some became philosophers, and now that people could specialize in these things, we were finally able to get some more advancements in society. Like before, Howard here would never have enough time to learn how to read because he was so busy farming, but now that John could produce food for both of them, Howard could finally learn how to read and could now help John to keep track of his transactions in exchange for food. What a happy transaction! Note here that accounting would require maths and written language, which really hasn't been invented yet. So that all sounds good, but was this new way of life a better way of life? Well, probably not actually, but it was probably necessary for us to continue along our evolutionary path. So what were the problems with humanity beginning to farm? Well, since people lived more densely, they were more susceptible to disease. And agriculture isn't that environmentally friendly either. Building dams, clearing forests, or nowadays drilling for oil all take a huge toll on the environment. The third setback is that a class society also emerged now that people could actually own things. As opposed to hunter-gatherers where you could only wield what you carried like in Zelda, now instead you can own more or less stuff, thus introducing rich and poor to a higher degree. Also, as people acquired more belongings, having to defend what's yours became relevant. So many historians here argue that loitering and plundering became much more of a thing at this time. As people had to start thinking about defending themselves, physical strength benefited the man, and we at this point for the first time start to see an inequality between the sexes. Typically men would assume the position of defending, and along with that new empowerment to men, decision-making power also came naturally. The phenomenon of owning property also makes it important to distinguish who owns the property, and eventually who inherits it. So to make sure that your child was actually yours, women became more and more viewed as property of the man and should not be shown to others. However, as written language really hasn't been invented yet, much of these things about history is mostly just speculations, and I want you to take all of this with a grain of salt. Here's a bit of salt. At this point, you can ask yourself if all development is positive. Agriculture got us where we are today, and thanks to it you can pursue a career of your choice and not just hunt food all day. But it also introduced class society, inequality, and it's hurting our little planet. Some food for thought that I think you should all chew on a little bit. That's all for this episode. The advent of agriculture is such a pivotal milestone in our history, and it at least deserves one video of our time. Now that that is all done, we can keep tracing our timeline as we look at the first civilizations in history, but that's in our next episode. I hope you'll be back for that one. Bye bye.